Welcome to the Secret Keepers Podcast with your host, Kareen Zutleger. Join us as we uncover the hidden thoughts, stories, and moments that help bring light to the healing power of truth and examine how silence can affect us mentally, physically, and spiritually. We'll also share profound stories, interviews, and transformative narratives to help release ourselves from the hidden and step into healing towards inner peace, joy, and fulfillment. Now, here's your healing strategist and host, Kareen.
Welcome to the Secret Keepers Podcast. And today I have my guest, Sophia Portelli, and I'm going to let Sophia tell you a little bit about herself.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be on your podcast and be talking with you, Kareen. This is going to be amazing. I'm Sophia Portelli. I am 28. I live in Los Angeles, and I'm a manager of brand partnerships and nonprofit partnerships at Fox Entertainment. But I've been out here for 6 years. I am from the Midwest originally, actually. I grew up in Minnesota. I went to University of Wisconsin. That's why I know
Yay,
you.
go
I met your
Badgers.
Yeah, go Badgers. I met your daughter at Wisconsin, and was there for 4 years. And then pretty much right after I graduated, I moved out to Los Angeles to kind of pursue my dreams of working in TV and movies. It wasn't always that way though, for sure. I went in pre-med into Wisconsin. Yeah, completely different. And just like completely a completely different person, I'd say, than I am today. At that time I was closeted. I am a lesbian, identify as a lesbian, but that's something that I came out within the past like 6 or 7 years. So I knew that about myself for a long time growing up in Minnesota, and through high school and college, but didn't really come out until my senior year to everyone I knew and to my family. So um, that is something that has definitely shaped who I am, how I am today, how I interact with people, and even my career too. So and I'm so happy, much happier now than I am when I was keeping that a secret of myself. But yeah, I'm so
Yeah,
excited to be here and talking with you.
yeah. And I am so excited to have you here. And that's huge, right? Because, you know, first of all, I want to talk about going into college thinking that you're pre med,
Yeah,
and then somewhere along the line, you realize probably this really isn't for me. This isn't
yeah,
who I am, right?
yeah,
This
yes,
is maybe a dream of somebody else's that
yeah,
kind of got whispered in my ear.
yeah,
And that often happens as young people.
totally.
So I want to talk about that a little bit because
Yeah,
it can feel like we're letting other people down
right.
because, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to do this thing, and
Yeah,
then you shift. And
yeah.
so what inside of you made you recognize that this is not the right path for me?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, and I think it stems a little bit of how I was in high school and junior high too. I have always been a high achiever, sometimes to my detriment. In
Okay.
high school, I joke, but like I was, the president of National Honor Society. I was on Amnesty International. I was first chair saxophone. I was a captain of the track team. I always was someone who was like, I gotta just dip my hand into everything. I want to be, the best at everything that I can be.
Okay.
Um, School, I excelled in school. I was, very high achieving there. But admittedly, in looking back on it, I was definitely doing some of those things because I was keeping something inside of me about myself. And I kind of thought I needed to overcompensate, for that. I was like, hey, I am queer. At that time I was like, I don't know if I only like women or if I like boys too. I mean, I grew up in a smaller Midwestern town, and I grew up
Yeah.
Catholic as well. So it wasn't even like something that I really knew that I could be, and I
Sure.
think, the first instances of me seeing that were truly on television, and in movies. It was like, oh, they're okay. What is that? Because I
Yeah.
wasn't like I was taught that. And I actually went to Catholic school, until like seventh grade. So, then moving, it was like I was exposed to a lot of different things, but it was something that I still was like, I'm not comfortable, I'm not comfortable with this.
Mhm.
I, my family is like one of the most important things to me. And when I was in eighth grade, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. So that is something
Okay.
that like very much brought our family together. We were like I mean, we were close before then, but then, I mean, I'm like going through that, we became even stronger. So like my bond with my family and my bond with with my faith was very, became, it was tested and then strong, right? Because then
Mhm.
she survived, and my brother stayed
Yeah.
from home from college to be with us. So like it was like, oh, I got even closer with my brother. He's 6 years older than me, so it was like
Sure.
this time where I was, a young adult and he was a young, like we were getting
Yeah.
to spend time together. And I I was like, I want to be a doctor after that. I was like, this is, I want to be an oncologist. I want to, do
Mm.
this. My mom's oncologist was someone who was like so inspiring to me. She was she's this Irish woman, had a strong accent who, like it was just like
Okay.
I was like, oh, I want to be her, one day. And it was like,
Okay.
and I want to like take this bond that I have like with my family, and I want to just like take that into my career. And I was like, I I thought that that was the path for me. But I definitely, I mean, being a doctor, I think is also just like a very high achieving profession as well. I think,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
growing up, I was like, that's what I want to do. I mean, I joked when I was younger, I was like, I want to be an actress, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be an art, I'd say all these
Yeah.
things. I want to do all of it at the same time. But then
Sure.
I was like, no, like medicine is such a profound calling. I've nothing
Mhm.
but respect for people who follow into that. I'm like, yeah, this makes sense for me. I'm the
Okay.
president of National Honor Society. I'm the head of all these things. It makes sense for me to pursue, this calling in college. And
Yeah.
I think pretty soon on, I was like, oh, this is, first of all, you need an extreme amount of dedication to be a doctor and to go through medical school and
Sure.
all those
Yeah.
things. And it's not like I didn't have that dedication, but I think in college, my eyes were open to just so many new paths that I had never really seen before. It also just coincided with me kind of trying to figure out who I was and myself. So that is something that was difficult for me to do while also like being pre-med. It was like, okay, I'm
Sure.
also like going through this major identity crisis, because like my senior year, like one of my best friends came out. Like I had friends who were queer in high school, like towards the end of my high school career, and that very much triggered like, oh my gosh, okay, so there are people even where I'm from who are queer and like who are
Yeah.
out. And I think that really right before college kind of triggered like a come to Jesus moment. I was like, okay, I kind of got to figure this out because it's not going away. I'm like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I am this way, but I don't know. So it was just like my freshman and
Mhm.
sophomore year kind of became a, I mean, any student's freshman and sophomore year is a very chaotic time. They're on their own for the first time, but then it was like on
Mhm.
top of that, I was also trying to just figure out this big thing about myself. Trying to join a sorority and trying to make friends, and then I was
Yeah.
like, I took one entertainment class, I think my the end of my junior year or end of my freshman year, and I'm like, wait a second, like this has always been my passion. Like movies
There
and
you
TV
go.
have always been my
Mhm.
passion. And, I wanted to be a doctor because I wanted to make a difference, and we can get into this later, but I realized like, TV and movies also make a difference,
They
that's,
do.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
I feel too like you really you covered a lot, like you covered a
I
lot.
covered a
So
lot. I'm
you
sorry.
covered a lot. Just
Yeah,
going back to being able to drop the mask, right? Because you picked up a mask of like perfect. If I do everything perfect, what I was hearing you say anyways is if I do everything really perfect, I will be undetected. Like
yeah,
I'll go unnoticed, and therefore I can like it kind of escape any sort of scrutiny that might come along if anybody questions me as to like who I am and what I'm doing. And then right, you get into college and you're really becoming who you authentically are, so the mask drops off, and then you don't have to do all the people pleasing things, right? Because
right.
the perfectionism, right, comes into it plays into really a worth, right? It's that worth piece of things, that am I worthy to be even who I was born to be? And
Yes.
you're born the way you were born, despite other people's opinions about it. This is the way you came, and as a mama, and as a mama who has also raised a queer human, I know I'm the mama, right? And
Yeah.
you see it, right? So you know that this is the way you came. This is who you came here to be, and I know that, and I don't think there's any um reason, right? Any reason to have to prove yourself and your worth to other humans. So yay for you for being authentically yourself. I love being able to spend time with you. You are this beautiful light, and you bring beautiful light into the lives of our children, and I love that about you, um, and the work that you do. And you're going to talk a little bit about what you do for work now, but let's talk a minute about how keeping that secret that you had, how did it affect you? Did it affect you physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally? What kind of ramifications did really keeping that for as long as you did have on you?
I mean, I think it had ramifications across the board and on all of those elements, just because I mean, as you've talked on this podcast, like keeping any secret inside of you is hard, but I think especially when it's goes back to really the core of who you are, and like you said, we're born this way, and I really I have always believed that, but I think then as you start to get, as you start to become more conscious and like in, as a junior high and in high school, you're like,
Mhm.
oh, but like no one else was born this way, or at least
Mhm.
I'm seeing that no one else was this way. So maybe I wasn't. Maybe I did make this decision. I mean, it's like you kind of go
Right.
through a like, oh my gosh. And I think what you were talking about is like overcompensating because you weren't sure you were like worth that. I do think that that's a lot of something that a lot of queer people tend to do is like, okay, I got to make up for it in all these other ways. And then, yeah, if I'm ever questioned about it, it's like, well, okay, but I'm president of NHS and I'm this high achiever and I have a
Mhm.
4.0, and then it's
Mhm.
like, oh, and then that's another thing about me. Like that it's like
Yeah.
you can kind of like sweep under the rug. And I saw that with other queer friends, later on. It was like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, so we were all those high achieving kids kind of. And then,
Yeah.
once so I don't think my high achieving was a negative effect of that. I mean, I've
No.
always been a passionate go-getter,
Mhm.
and my parents are like some of the most driven, hardworking individuals. So I think I would have
Sure.
always turned out that way, but doing it for that reason because or doing it partially for that reason because I thought I needed to kind of make up for something. Um, I mean, yeah, that took a huge toll on my mental health. I was very lost, I feel like my freshman and sophomore years, and I think a lot of people are lost in college too, so it's not just me,
Mhm.
but because I was because of my faith and kind of my faith growing up was something that said I couldn't be this way. That
Sure.
was hard because I think for a long time I thought faith and family were very intertwined, and my family is like I said before, one of the most important part of my life, and I
Mhm.
maintain that still is the case. But I think I started to spiral and be like, well, what if this ruins that incredible bond that I have. That was the main reason it took me so long to kind of embrace this, because even as I started to meet friends, it was like, well, they have gay friends, like this is, I think it's going to be really not too big of a deal necessarily for friends, but it's like it was because I was afraid to kind of just embrace that amongst my family, and like I also didn't want to abandon my faith. Like faith had always been an important thing, but if I
Yeah.
was to listen to what I was being told, like I can't really have the two things, right? Like I can't
Sure.
have that faith and also be a gay woman, which I disagree with now, But I
Yeah.
think just during that time of when you're really so malleable and vulnerable, like I started having a lot of negative thoughts of being like, you know what, I'm never gonna come out. I'm straight.
Mhm.
I'm never gonna do that. I'll just, go along this path. That's probably, not even me. It's just like a lot of
Mhm.
self doubt. And I
Sure.
think that manifests, in mental health issues. That
Sure.
manifests in
Absolutely.
I didn't really work out a
Hmm.
lot my freshman and sophomore year, which had something, I'd always been an athlete in high school, but I kind of
Okay.
stopped doing that, admittedly. Um, I mean, in college, yeah, I also had never really drank in high school. I wasn't someone who drank in
Hmm.
hby school, so that when college, of course, I
Good
was in
for
a
you.
sorority, so I was like, oh, I'm gonna try this, and I didn't feel like that was me by any means, So it was like, okay,
Yeah.
all right, that's not me. So it was just like this kind of like trying out all of these, as you said, masks. Like, who am I? And I don't know who
Yeah.
I am. But I mean, that really did take a toll on me. And I feel like by the end of my sophomore year, I was like, I was in the worst shape that I'd been in. I was,
Oh,
really like I had good friends, but I also was like kind of like, are they my friends? Like, would they, would they accept
yeah.
me for this? And I also felt like, every time I was on the phone with my parents, because I called them all the time, I felt like I was, as you said, like I felt like I was keeping this secret. It was like, okay, I'm talking to you about all the things that are going on in college, but I'm also not talking to you about this like major identity crisis that I'm kind of having,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
which felt, that felt like a lie, in many ways, because like
Sure.
I had never kept things from my parents before.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
so that was
Yeah.
that
That's a
was hard.
heavy, yeah, that heavy feeling of that, keeping that secret. So let's kind of unpack that a little
Yeah.
bit. So, obviously, I know you have an amazing relationship with your parents,
Yeah.
and I know you continue to have a deeply spiritual life. Your faith still remains a pivotal part of your life. So, talk to us about how all of that happened. Like, obviously you told your parents at some
Hmm.
point, and also you're reconciling it with your faith. I mean, you're a strong Italian woman.
Yes.
And you come from a strong Italian people who
Yes.
have a deep, deep faith.
Yeah.
Um, and so, what did that look like for you?
Well, I think I'll touch on the faith first. As you said,
Okay.
a strong Italian woman, which is so true. But repurposing that strength and drive to be like, hey, this is how I was made. I really had to like kind of
Hmm.
have this reframing. I started therapy in college too, and I think therapy
Hmm.
was a huge thing. Um,
Sure.
and just meeting people who came from so many walks of life. I mean, the nice thing about Wisconsin, I'm sure, Carol would say the same, but there are so many people from the East Coast, the West Coast. It's not really just the
Hmm.
Midwest. A lot of people
Oh
go to the
no.
Big
Yeah.
Ten. So it was like, oh my gosh, like there are so many places that I could be this way. So then it was like, I got to reframe this. I like I kept my faith. I was someone who, I didn't go to church every Sunday, but I went I prayed, I
Hmm.
did these things, and it was like, I had to kind of have this like inner dialogue with the higher power being like, okay, you made me this way. So I'm just gonna be this. I'm gonna move forward like that. And I think that took like a good 2 years, for me to kind of like,
Mm.
okay, I've accepted the fact that I can be a spiritual person and faithful person, but also still be who I am. That doesn't negate how I'm practicing
No.
or like or worshiping or
Hmm.
whatever that be. And
Yeah.
um I still try to, thank thank God for so many blessings that I have. But one of the best things that I thank him for now is like, thank you for letting me, embrace this about myself and like be comfortable in that, because it was a lot of the time it's like our mental block, like who cares about what
Yeah.
what the system is saying. It was like, if I am okay with having this relationship and kind of not compartmentalizing, but like being both faithful and being who I am and being queer, um, that was like a very healing thing for me.
Oh
Just
my
like
goodness,
kind of
so
coming,
beautiful.
yeah, coming to terms with that.
Well,
And
and I
then,
think that I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
oh no,
interrupt you.
please, you first.
I think that so like what's coming for me is your knowing, right? That inner knowing that it really is where everything needs to come from in the first place, right? So I
Yeah,
have that inner knowing, that inner guidance, my intuition, right? And I know that I have a direct plug in myself to God, right? So
yes,
when you're having these conversations and that They say prayer is, Wayne Dyer says this, when, prayer is when you talk to God, and when you sit, when you meditate, your intuition is when God talks back to you.
Yeah.
And so knowing that you're listening to the inner guidance that you're getting, and God is saying, this is who you are, and this is okay, and I love you, and you're not an outcast. And I feel like a lot of youth, a lot of humans out there have been kind of ostracized in some way, shape, or form, and with a belief that they somehow don't measure up, which has
Yeah.
never been the message, the true message, like of Jesus, not the one that I know anyways,
Right.
of, that of all encompassing unconditional love. And so I want to celebrate you for that, to
Thank
knowing
you.
and anchoring into that deep, deep knowing and trust that you are connected to your source. You have it. Nobody gets to take that away from you, and you get to continue and carry on with your life. So anyway, so go
Yeah.
on, because this is so
No,
good.
and
This is so good for a lot
I
of people
love
to
that.
hear.
I was gonna say you're gonna make me tear up, but yeah, exactly. It's like I realized that my biggest critic was actually myself, my inner
Mhm,
dialogue. It was like no
mhm,
one is actually not allowing me to be this way and to follow
mhm,
on this path. And yeah, I think it's your inner dialogue is the one that's speaking to the higher power and
mhm,
and coming to terms and coming together for that. So, yeah, I mean, that was a totally freeing thing. Like I said, I don't know if it was like I woke up one day and was like, okay, now, it was definitely like, I definitely think I was actually at like in church or like at a mass when I was like, you know what, this is it. It was like, I'm gonna, it was like, this is the end for me. Like, not the end, but like, this is the end of my doubting kind of.
yeah,
And then when I came to that, it was like, okay, now that I've come to terms with that, I can well, I also had a summer in LA in between my junior and senior year. I told a couple of friends my junior year, like as we were leaving kind of college. I didn't tell
mhm,
my family until after Los Angeles because I
okay,
the other thing that I think some queer people think is like, okay, now we've decided this about ourselves, or not decided, but now we've come to terms with this. But I also had like really not that much experience in it, so it was like, okay, what if I think I am this way, but I've never even gone on a date with a girl, you know? So it was like
yeah,
I kind of had this summer in Los Angeles when I interned for my job, where it was like I actually went into it just like open. I did yeah, when I introduced myself to not introduce myself to people, but it was like no one knew me here, so it was like, yeah,
yeah,
I'm just gonna like pretend that I've been this way. I've always been out, and that was
mhm,
the crazy thing is one of the roommates that I had never really told anyone that she thought she was queer, and she saw me. She's like, "You're so out, and you're so open about it, and you're so," and like I'm like, "That's
secret.
wow." I was like, "I am really a good actress then," because I'm. But it was like then we kind of had this moment of like healing, healing together, and her telling me and her
Yeah,
journey. So basically after that summer, then I was like, not only have I kind of come to terms with, my faith, I've also helped another person kind of come to
yeah.
terms with herself and her faith.
Oh,
And
I
I've
got
also,
goosebumps.
yeah, and I've
Yeah.
also like
Mhm,
experienced it now. I went on dates when I was out in
mhm,
LA, and by that time I was like, okay, I think every aspect of like where maybe my family would question it, not question it, but maybe be like, okay, how do you know this? Like how do you
yeah, yeah,
I felt like I had kind of covered my bases. Um, and I came up to my siblings first. It was a little bit easy. I don't
mhm.
know if Carl did the
Yes,
same, but I
I'm
mean
pretty sure you did.
yeah, it was a little bit easier, right? It was like, okay, I could
Mhm,
tell my sister, in the
yeah.
car, and she was like, "That's great. Like, I don't care. I love you." It was one of the most like, "Okay, I love you." Like, oh, she was like, "Why are you crying?" Like, we're good. It was like,
Yeah.
it was, she didn't care, at all. And,
Mhm.
yeah, told my brother and his fiance at the time, they were super open. I was like, okay, now my parents, who have known me the longest, who have loved
Mhm.
me the longest, I was like very nervous, but they were very open to it. I think for them, like their faith was, I think, the biggest thing where I was like, okay, well, we just like don't, this is something that we haven't always been, but they're like, but we love you. That's the most important part. So
Yeah.
we're gonna navigate this with you. And the other thing I think that, like, as soon as they kind of heard that, they immediately worried, like, oh my God, is your life going to be harder because of this? Like, I
Yeah.
think
Oh, I know
truly,
those
yeah,
fears.
I
I
think
know
that
those
was
fears.
truly like one of the biggest things for them. They're like,
Hmm.
we worry for you because like their generation,
Hmm.
they saw a lot of hate, hate and
Yes.
being, you know, I won't
Which
even
is
get into
so
that. Yeah, but it
right.
was like I think it was like a oh my gosh, like an alarm in their head. They're like, our poor baby, like
Hmm.
our poor daughter,
Hmm.
who, our premature daughter who was born, like 3 pounds, is now like she had, she potentially is going to face this hate, and life is going to be a lot harder for her. And especially at that point, I kind of knew that I wanted to move to LA. So like on top of that, they were like, and we're not going to be there to kind of protect her and love her,
Yeah. Oh,
so that was something that they had to kind of I was like, but no, we've reclaimed this. Like I actually have so many friends who support me, and uh, you know I continued to tell them when I came out to my coworkers at my first job. I was like, no, and they support me and love me and don't change. So I think
hmm.
it was like me having to remind them, like, it's going to be okay. And I also recognize that that's a big privilege, because I know that a lot of people do still face that hate. Living in Los Angeles
Absolutely.
is a place that's very progressive and open, and
Hmm.
um, but I think if I had stayed in Minnesota, that would have been harder for me to live that truth. Not with my family, but just like in the city, I remember
Right.
I like
The neighbors,
yeah,
yeah, anybody. Yeah.
I think I held hands with a girl like in downtown, St. Paul once, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting looks, like I'm actually like
Hmm.
getting people being like, we don't see that as often. So,
Sure.
um, yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful for my family because if not for them, I definitely would. I think it would have brought me down another spiral of like, okay, because I think you need your family or your chosen family to help
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
embrace that. So, um, a big
Absolutely.
kudos to my parents for like kind of, yeah, not accepting, but like, I mean, yes, accepting, but like kind of just like realizing and reframing in their own mind of like,
Hmm.
okay, our daughter's going to be okay, like this is who she is, and she's happy, and
Hmm.
she's like
Yeah,
embracing who, I feel like that was the biggest like thing. They're like, wow, we see, how happy you are and how you are living your truth, and that's special. So,
absolutely. And plus on some level, like I said before, I mean, we as parents, we know, right? We raise you. Like
yeah,
we know because we know you.
yes,
Um, and I have a mentor of mine who would say, like, because people say, well, we need to tolerate this or that, and say, nobody wants to be tolerated.
no,
We want everybody wants and needs acceptance, love and connection, right?
yeah,
We have certainty, uncertainty, we have love and connection, we have acceptance. Those are things that we as human beings we need. Those are basic needs. And so we want to be accepted. And as
yeah,
parents, we want our children to be accepted you know um in whatever the communities are that we belong in,
mhm,
right? We want to be accepted in that community. It's a human need, right? Our worth, our connection, our safety and trust, three big pieces of who we are
yeah,
as human beings. And um as a parent, right, we have concerns enough, right? There's fear, and I've really reverted back to the only thing that is real is love. So if it's not love, it's not real. So that fear that would arise, I have to take a step back, take a deep breath. And you see me for this. I'm putting my hand over my heart right
hmm,
now. This is actually an anchor that I have, that I remind myself that I am safe. So if I'm safe, right, then I emit the vibrations of safety. So therefore, anybody in my energetic field is going to be safe. And
yeah,
that is what I want to see. I'm a very loving, accepting human. And but hate is something that we see it across the board in all different phases, and
yeah,
we can do better. We
yeah,
can do better as humans. I remember I was very angry with God. I was like, why would you give me this beautiful baby and then want it to be an outcast where people are saying, well, if you don't live by this religious view,
Right.
toss this child to the side and let it live on the streets. Well, that was a firm hell no for me. That was never going to happen. I don't care what religious structure you fall
Hmm.
under. This mama was like, that was a hell no. It's never going to work for me. I'm never going to do that. I don't look at my child and think, oh, I don't even, like, sexual orientation is not something I look at because with our children who are deemed straight, and I use that in air quotes, I don't want to know what they're doing as consensual adults any more than I want to do. I mean, none of them,
Yeah, yeah,
they don't
exactly.
want to know what we're doing. I don't
Right.
know. As long as it's consensual, it's their business, right?
Yeah,
And so really knowing that, right? And having, you know, I just wanted to create an environment where people knew if you are in my space, if you are in my sphere of any 50 feet, right? 50 feet rule of me, I want you to be able to feel the love I have for you as another human being. And so seeing the hateful things that it would make me like, be God, like, why would you do this? Like, what God would
yeah,
create this? And then I had a epiphanal moment, like 3 years ago. I'm at this event with my mentor, and I'm like, oh, I'm not. It's not God. God doesn't do this. It's humans, right? The
yeah,
human does this. The human decides these invisible boundaries and these invisible rules and these things, and
yeah,
they say that they all come from God or whatever. And so it was like that moment of clarity of like my heart and my love and my love and care for people, that's a gift, like it's such a gift that I know comes from our creator. And being able to share that with other humans makes me feel really good about it. And not everybody is like me, right? So there are going to be, things that they butt up
yeah,
against and maybe experiences they have. And can I see the human in them and separate that? So I do that. I try to separate the human from their behavior and know that, it's the behavior that I don't really like. So
yeah.
anyway, all that to be said is, I think your parents were like, I'm so grateful that were, they love you no matter
Yes,
what it is that Sophia
exactly,
brings. It's
exactly.
like, I love you, you know, and that is amazing because, yeah, not everybody gets that, which creates a whole nother host of issue amongst young people, right? When we're not accepted within our own families.
Totally. And
Yeah.
but I do want to touch on something that you said is like that the presence that you give off, right? Like that presence of love. Like
Mm,
as you said, not everyone does that. And I think there's
mm,
more people who don't do that than
mm,
do. And I
mhm.
think also when you're keeping a secret, especially about who you are, even if you don't know it, you're giving off a small presence of not accepting that, right? Like that's where
Sure.
internalized homophobia comes from. It's like even for years when I knew that I thought I would be, I don't think I was probably someone who could be approached about that necessarily, or at
Sure.
least,
Sure.
I was
Sure.
just like very uncertain. Um,
Mhm.
and then like that twist or like that shift when I was out in LA and like even that anecdote I said about the roommate that I lived with who was like, "Wow, you seem so open and accepting." And I was like, "Wow, that was really just a mental shift that I kind of
Yeah.
had." Like I've
Yeah.
only told one or two other people at this
Mhm.
point, but it was really just like that internal, yeah, you're automatically giving off a different aura. Um, and hopefully, yeah, hopefully inspiring and hopefully allowing people to like talk to you and feel safe and present, in your presence. So
Yeah.
um, I think that's a huge
Like,
thing, and I think that's something that not a lot of people do. But I think it only takes, like you said, like kind of a mental shift. You kind of had that, okay, well, hell no, I'm
mhm.
not going to do that. I'm going to
Yeah.
just be this like say, I'm going to be this
Yeah.
safe presence. So I think that's really special and important.
Yeah.
Um,
And the inner critic can be so loud, right? It's
exactly.
difficult, like, to look in the mirror and say, what's really going on here? And I use I just was in a classroom of high school students the other day, and I used the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other to try to talk about the inner critic so they would have an understanding. And like, like the little devil has got the little pitchfork and it's just constantly poking at you, going, "You don't belong. Who's going to accept you?
Yeah.
Who's going to, who's going to love you, right?" And "Grr," right, and in there that little voice, and that can get louder and louder. Unless we like, in neural encoding speak, you know we take that and we stop it, right?
Yeah.
We do a pattern interrupt and interrupt those little voices in our head that are telling us that we don't belong, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody wants to belong. And
Exactly.
yeah, so it does start with you. It
It
starts with,
does.
and like you said, that energy you give off, the energy that you are, it makes a big difference, right? If I have, even no matter what you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter
Yeah.
how old you are, if I have a chip on my shoulder, people feel it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
but and I love your, the metaphor of like the devil and the angel on your shoulder. Whenever you see that in TV and movies too, it's you. You're the
yeah, it's
angel and
you.
the devil. It's the two
Yeah.
versions of you. So
Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
really does start with, yeah, with you internally kind of making that change. So,
That inner dialogue and in
exactly.
knowing, right? The most important thing, and I teach this, right, is to love you. I
Yeah.
guess if I can love me, no matter what, I can love me, my love ripples out.
Yeah.
Right, and I can look at other people and love them and accept them the way they are, and reserve my judgment. So we talk about in my inner critic classes, we name them, right? So Nancy is my negative voice that I have.
Okay.
Judy is the judge one. Judy gets really judgy, and then Victoria is pretty vicious. Like
Okay.
she might have some sassy things to say and quip about somebody, but when I can call that and know it and recognize it and put it in check, it's like, "Oh, okay, Nancy. No, no, she's trying to drive the bus again. I gotta let Nancy sit in the
Yeah.
back seat because she will run the show if given opportunity." And so will Judy, and so will Victoria.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't let them drive the bus because they can be pretty reckless. So, um, I am like so grateful that you were able to come on my show and
Me too.
be so completely vulnerable and honest
Yeah.
about your journey. I mean, you're doing really cool things. You're not a doctor.
I'm not.
However, working in the entertainment field and doing the things that you do, they're really cool. And I love that. And tell me, like, how have you for yourself created like joy or fulfillment or like just peace? Like, how have you done that for yourself
Yeah. Well, in my job or just in life in general?
in life in
In
general?
life in general.
Hmm.
Well, I have made a really great support system out in Los Angeles, one where I can be my full self, and that definitely was not the case with my friends in college. And that's nothing against my friends in college.
Right.
They just knew a different version of me that
Sure.
wasn't 100% honest with them. And the really
Mhm.
nice thing about my community out here of both straight and queer people, but is that they just
Mhm.
like love me unconditionally for who I am.
Yeah.
Arguably one of my best friends is straight, and she like still we can talk about all these things, and she, there's no difference,
Right.
and the community that I've made out in LA that is queer, which I think would have been more difficult to make in the Midwest, just logistically, okay, just because
Sure.
of who lives there. But pretty soon after I moved to LA, I was like, okay, I want to embrace this part of myself. I want to go out and meet more people who are like me. I want to keep the friends that I've made who aren't, but like really having that empowering community has been super important for me and validating.
Mm.
I mean, I try to spend time in that community to make me happy, by going to events
Yeah.
or going out dancing or whatever it may be. I have a great exercise. Like I broke my wrist for 2 months, so that was hard for me to get out of that.
Yeah.
But like truly, just I feel like in any city, like the community that you make when you're also working out. Like I'm a big yoga person,
Uh-huh.
so
I
like
love
I
that.
I have that meditation and exercise with me. I try to have creative outlets. I used to write a lot when I was younger. I wanted to be a novelist at one point. I wrote a book when I was younger, and then I transitioned to screenplays. I'm like slowly getting back into that, of course, with a full-time job. It's hard for me.
Yeah.
Like, okay, now I'm going to sit down and spend 3 hours of my writing.
Yeah.
But but that is still
Yeah.
something that's therapeutic for me. And I maybe one of the reasons that we first started talking about podcasts is that I did have a podcast last summer
Hmm.
with a friend of mine where we talked about all things queer and love
Hmm.
and living
Yeah.
in your truth about that, which I really like doing. I'm hoping I can relaunch it this summer with a similar
Cool.
angle of talking about queerness and how it affects us in positive ways. But I mean, just I get my happiness through other people. Like I like my alone time, but I also am someone who frequently has something every night of the week because I just like and it's not even necessarily going out, but it's just like I love maintaining connections and maintaining
Yeah.
my community of friends.
Awesome.
So yeah, even if it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, you come over and I'll cook for you. I love
Yes.
cooking. I love cooking and baking. So that's something that has always been a love language for me. I learned that from my parents.
Yes.
That was
Yes.
always their
That's
love
the
language.
Italian in you.
That's the Italian in me. So now
Yes.
that's actually something I try to do that at least once a week where I'll like try to cook for someone. I prefer to cook for
Amazing.
somebody else than just myself. So, but then
Well,
it's like, yeah. So it's
yeah.
just I think I find a lot of joy in those moments with the people that I love. And
Oh,
that's the
so
saddest
good.
part about not having my family out here because I'd be doing
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
I'd be doing that with them all the time if I could.
Well,
Um,
they need to retire out there so they can
I
get out of the
know, right?
Midwest winter, right?
I know.
No, we're
I'm like
working on
Palm
that. We're working on
Springs. Yeah,
that.
I'm working on it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but yeah.
Okay, so normally I ask just what, to come up with one nugget of wisdom that you would like to share with the audience. Like everything you've been through, this journey that you've been through, can you share one nugget of wisdom that like really stands out for you?
Well, I think it has to be about that inner dialogue. It has to be like before you can come to terms with everyone else and with the world around you, I think you have to come to terms with who you are on the inside.
Hmm.
And maybe come to terms is the wrong word, but I think you need to make peace with that person.
Sure. Yeah, make peace
Um,
with it.
and as you said, like because maybe there are multiple people inside of you, maybe multiple, iterations of you, but kind of making sure that they're all working together and towards your happiness. I think the second you start to have that negative Nancy or like that inner doubt, um, that can be deafening, and I've been there. Like
Hmm.
I feel like, and I mean, even now, like when you go through hard times, like it's like that voice can come out, and it's so deafening, and it's hard to get out of that. So I think,
Hmm.
um, yeah, making sure
Awesome.
when the call is coming from it within the house, right, or like when that
Yeah.
name is coming from
Oh
within
my God.
you,
Oh my God.
yeah.
That made me think of that movie when a
Yeah,
stranger
I don't
calls.
know what it
Oh
is.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
it is from a movie,
God.
right? Yeah. But like recognizing that, coming to terms with
Yes.
that,
Hmm.
and then also just like relying on your community and relying on your friends and your family when you can't get out of that dialogue.
Yeah.
Because I think that's also something because of my overcompensating, because I was like, then when I was like, hey, well, when I have issues, I'm happy with who I am, but when I have issues, I'm not gonna like put that on somebody else. It was like
Mm,
when I do start doubting again, that's not gonna be anybody else's problem except for me. But I think that's a bad headset, mindset to get into too.
mhm.
So, even if it's just one person or two people, but like that you can just be honest with, you're like, hey, I'm having these negative thoughts again. You're
Yeah.
like, how can like maybe you can't even help me, but can I just talk to you, about
Just
it? Or
listen.
like, yeah, can
Yeah.
you just listen? I don't think there always needs to be a solution, but just having someone who you can like really talk to and understand about that, I think is important too. So
Yeah. That way, if it gets out of hand, they can help you, be like, nope,
yeah, yeah,
sometimes it gets
because
out of hand, but
as
yeah.
as empathetic and as intuitive as friends and family can be, I think you know, we're good at secret keeping a lot of the
Mhm.
time, you know. So
Oh
I
yeah.
think,
Oh, for sure.
right. So I think, you know, I think being honest about that when you really do need help is important too. So
Yeah, absolutely. Ask for help when you need it. And
yeah,
there's no shame in that. No shame in needing help and asking for help. And that's
yeah.
important to reach out and ask. And if nothing else, you can reach out to me. Like yeah, I can be found on social media. And but speaking of that, if somebody wanted to connect with you, how could they find you, Sophia?
They could also find me on social media. I'm mostly on Instagram, to be honest.
Mhm.
My handle is Sophia Portelli or Sophia
Yeah,
underscore Portelli. I'm like, wait a
yeah, yeah.
second, I definitely have the underscore.
Uh-huh.
Um, and yeah, that's where I operate. And on TikTok
I was
lately,
gonna say you're like TikTok famous,
yeah, well,
so
not
you're
TikTok
right on
famous, but lately I feel like
that.
I'm trying to use, everyone has always said that I'm always like because when I was closeted, I wanted to know everything about queer media and queer television, queer entertainment, and queer news. I now I'm slowly starting to use those skills. So yeah, I'm on TikTok. I do some comedic,
Hmm.
like I react to gay news, and I always try to share that, with
Yeah,
people.
a little
Um,
humor, a little
yeah,
yeah,
through humor.
yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Because but in a way that's healing. That's healing for myself
Yes.
because the Sophia that was 10 years ago, who was graduating from high school, would have never thought that the Sophia today exists and is doing that. So even if it's
Mm,
for, only 1,000 people or whoever it might be, like
yeah,
it's been something that's really freeing for me. And so was the
yeah,
podcast. So that's why, I
yeah.
want to hopefully relaunch that at some point. But
Well,
yeah,
I love it, and I love you. So thank you so much for being
thank
a guest on
you.
the Secret Keepers podcast. And till next time,
I've had the best time. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you for joining the Secret Keepers podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please give us a like and follow so we can invite you back. And if you just want more, visit CorrineZuleger.com. Remember, you're not alone.